because I've been checking it out, baby. I checked it out a couple of times.
Humankind must be made to see the same page, the same picture, in full color, and with the compassion and concern appropriate for our task. If we are as easy to manipulate as any ad agent or psychiatrist will tell us we are, then if we are able to be masters of our own fate, then we should be the ones to
meet their interests.
Any plan for change is not without risk. Change of this scale and importance cannot happen without the risk of injury or loss of life. Our point is to save life, all life, human, animal, plant, and our host planet itself. For this reason, this change must happen, literally, overnight. It must come quickly and quietly, or it will risk becoming a quagmire we do not have time for. Giggity. Certainly the wealthy, and those under their belief system, will want to stop such change. We have no delusion that peace will prevail during this transition. The differences in the human brain we discussed in Part 1, assures us of that. And those differences, played upon us like a fiddle, has become so much in opposition to each other, and it seems so fortuitous, for the people in power. Our task is only that much more difficult, facing the conditioned hostility on the part of those who will oppose this kind of change, even at the risk of losing everything.
So you have a built-in democracy, you have a participatory culture where all people participate, and that is in a constant process so that people will know up to the minute what is coming out, what exists, what is available, what is not available. In other words, there'll be many bulletins and many publications and visualizations of what is needed. So all the world's people will be informed constantly of what we don't know, what is needed badly, and asking for suggestions and papers and ideas from everybody. I just want to say this to you, that all the marvels and wonders of technology can amount to nothing unless it elevates humans to their highest potential. This is the aim of the future by design.
Taking charge from the power and wealth addicts will have to be a massively coordinated surprise intervention. On day one, and proceeding after that, we prioritize the changes which require the most time and planning, and those that ensure continuity of goods and services so that there is the least amount of panic, theft, or violence, until the new system is up and running smoothly. Yes, people might die. But they are dying right now, every minute, from starvation, or deprivation, caused by a system which is not working, and worse, appears to be designed to be like this. And such a brutal system cannot continue if we are to advance in any way. Obviously the intentions of such a plan are to be improved and expanded upon going forwards.
So when policymakers see things like climate change, peak oil, the economic crisis, or the fact that we're reaching limits in food production, they try to deal with them in isolation, instead of recognizing that these crises are fundamentals of a failing global system. Because of this ideology, because of these subliminal ideas, we're straitjacketed, and we're unable to respond in the way that we need to. Recognizing that we need not just tinkering, but transformation of the system. But the question is, how do we do that? My view is that we need to go back to each of these crises, understand how they work, and how they're so fundamentally interconnected.
Number 1. In the early morning hours, agents, of whatever group, must confiscate our biggest and fastest supercomputers, maybe the one outside of Salt Lake City, or wherever the most powerful currently is. We do this in every country participating, preferably all. We make sure outlying islands and small countries are all covered. We use the computers to take a global snapshot of all economic systems. All tax records, income data, spending data, movement of goods, uses of services, every event where moneyed transactions occur. Who is using what, and who is getting compensated at what rates. Down to the last person, with best guesses for lowest income and homeless populations. All data will include a 30 days prior, for establishing future economic maintenance of persons and enterprises. Number 2. Disband any and all banking systems not involved with the needs of individuals, on a daily basis, in order to monitor and assure the appropriate resources are being met, and no more, for now. There might be no more Wall Street, depending on how far we take this, so in such case they would no longer be needed and their skills could be applied to actually providing the minds and hands necessary to coordinate all the newly created global systems.
The solutions lie in the intelligent and humane application of science and technology, and more appropriate resource management in order to supply goods and services to everyone equitably, enabling the entire global population a very high standard of living.
If we think of and this is the second half of the book, this is the thing that really binds us together. Just think in your mind, love is the initial attachment, but out of that comes trust. And it's within trust that you begin to see your own ability to command yourself. That sheds into education. And once we get into school, if you have that sense of self-command, you begin to learn. And from there, if we build cities and habitat where we can all be talking with each other, that is strengthened. And when we eat around a table rather than in the back of a car, it's strengthened. There are so many things we know about how to build human beings. We know what imagination means. We know all the things that create the opportunity for a stable, caring society. And yet, we do not translate that into social policy.
Number 3. Cease all activities associated with our current economic system, in the recognition that it is a bad game, and one that has always been rigged. We detain all top corporate executives. First thing 8 a.m. on day 1. Use peaceful means to restrain them so they are unable to continue working in any capacity which involves the flow of capital. Unless they have a bodyguard, no weapons will be required, just a show of numbers and insistence. Drag them away if we must. Most financial decisions and payouts require an officer's signature to proceed, so without them the system is effectively halted. The gears of capitalism stop turning. Detain all other banking and investment leaders. This is done to stop them from changing the landscape of our economic system, in order to gain whatever last-minute gains they can take, though it won't matter when we are a moneyless society. All companies and enterprises will continue to function as they were the day before, sans the top leadership, and this will only be temporary. Number 4. Secure top government officials in all 3 branches of government. These may be protected persons, and we will try to explain our purpose and reasons and our declaration of a global intervention on behalf of all humankind. If those guarding their masters feel solidarity with us, they can peacefully join in the action. If such solidarity is not forthcoming, determine the nature of the type of person you are dealing with, and use the methods appropriate. This could result in injury or loss of life. New World men and women must state clearly that we are not seeking a destructive confrontation with our Old World human brothers and sisters, and abhor the antics of such conflict. However, we are now in survival mode, and if we are unable to convince our Old World associates of our mutual need, then, in order to avoid what is a clear suicide of the species, we must also be prepared for actual combat. If we are wrong in our basic assumptions, then we will have to be forgiven, and the old order of affairs could be restored. Until then we must do what any threatened animal will do in such a state of conflict. We may be New World man, but we know how Old World rules work, and they are vicious and brutal in nature. We don't want to harm anyone. Period. But we are defending ourselves in exactly the same manner as any animal whose existence is directly threatened, but it's so large of a threat that not everyone will easily recognize it. Number 5. Secure local government and governmental agencies. Now we have a snapshot of what is, and have secured the persons who could change or modify that snapshot. We have the ears and voices of local government to help maintain continuity and public safety. That's one hell of a good first day's work.
With the usual exceptions of injuries and sickness, everyone continues working, as usual, and goods and services continue to flow. People will be assured of continuity in income, either from current monies in the system, or from an alternative means of accounting. They will therefore have the same access to goods and services as they had in the last 30 days, right down to the T-bone steak and cable TV, or not, depending on your current financial status.
Using all of that workforce, which is no longer necessary, in a moneyless/marketless society, such as accountants, those in advertising and marketing, banking and investing, government employees associated with permits and fees, etc., would now all be free to work on the following. Implementation of a global resource management system. Gather all maps of known resources, mineral, power, wind, food, etc. Perhaps in conjunction with the student and college institutions playing an important role, and using educational institutions' computers and resources, to coordinate the gathering of this data. Implementation of a global, but moving to a more locally produced, goods production system. Compile list of manufacture and production resources and set up a production management system. Food and durable goods resources have highest priority in maintaining activities. Ensure that all plants and facilities have all the power they need. Begin design of more durable goods made to last, and conserve the resources we have. Safety, functionality, and quality of goods should now, and at every turn and stage of production, should be the focus of production. Begin setting up a global resource distribution system. Compile list of all shipping, cargo, railroad, and trucking companies. Begin shifting to alternatives to conserve energy and efficiency in delivery systems. LTA transportation. Hydrogen engine modifications. Electric. Compile list of all operational retail outlets, and assist with any transitional issues in maintaining the snapshot volumes of supplies to the public. Match individuals' locations to match and maintain acquisition of usual goods and services for individuals. Acquire IRS, Social Security, or other databases to account for everyone, and see if all their needs are being met. Next on day 2, we disband the Federal Reserve. Disband all global and settlement banks. And real intangible resources will be redirected to some or all of the newly formed systems. Panel to review all patents, now no longer of any value to anyone but the human race, seeking overlooked or forgotten technologies which can assist us going forwards. The argument of no inspiration to invent, create, or improve, is a false argument. Those who use this argument have not met enough people to understand the real nature of the human being in all its diversity. Artists and inventors are inspired, and will be so despite the lack of so-called incentive. Review all existing classified technologies in the vaults of all countries' militaries, to produce a list of all sequestered science technologies available to renew the health of our host's vital systems.
On day 3, we set up scientific and academic panels to ensure a smooth transition to a resource-based economy, ideally, or a suitable transient interim model of conducting human affairs. If we only go as far as democratizing enterprise, as men like economist Richard Wolff have proposed, then this panel could set up the necessary structure for those enterprises to work. Next, we humanize or naturalize all resources of our host planet, with a simple declaration, free to revision, which acknowledges the undeniable need for an economic/social intervention, and for the globalization and shared distribution of all resources, as a common birthright. Needs must be focused on, while allowing for freedoms of addictive behaviors, until such time that it too becomes obsolete. Wealth addiction, sex addiction, addictions to drugs or food, gambling, all these things will still exist. They can now go to centers of mental health when they recognize a repetitive behavior having negative consequences in their life. The centers can be built using the former wealth of ours going into the military-industrial complex. Now it can assure the mental/emotional well-being of every human on the planet instead. Maintaining production and economic activities requires us to offer those former professionals who are not in need of prior psychological help to cope without their addictions, the offer to come back into the system, and now, instead of focus on profits, begin to focus on needs. There are no more stockholders to placate, so it is easier to focus on serving the people, instead of serving profits. And focusing on making durable products, cost being irrelevant, to be better and longer lasting. By day 3, if not sooner, people will be needing basic supplies. So a system must be in place at least by day 3, which will allow us to purchase those items in the same amounts as we did before, based on our snapshot taken on day 1. Stores who need restocking will receive the same amount of goods as in the previous period. And so on. No money will be exchanged. The computer will know who needs what, and will issue instructions to each level of commerce to proceed. We could use the now unnecessary pool of accountants to monitor what the computer is doing, and making sure that the needs are met, and no errors in the software are present. We can utilize the existing card and reader systems already in stores and industry to use as money, or a score of access, which will be the same as monetary compensation was before the transition, and which will eventually be leveled out into a more equitable sharing of general wealth. Begin reorganization of enterprises that are essential for global health and human health. I would suggest a combination of reformed politicians, governmental workers, and our pool of architects to organize those industries needed to combat climate conditions first, then those industries related to food and basic human services. Later we can decentralize the farming to local production, and use the then vast unfarmed areas of the country to be restored to its natural state, interspersed with the new cities, defined and further designed for efficient and abundant human living, available to everyone, everywhere.
The goal of this intervention is to express the empathy and concern for our human family which is so lacking in our current brutal racketeering system, and allow every human being to heal, and to find fairness and equity for everyone. There will be many wolves in our midst who will want to continue gaining off the loss of others, so protection, by day 4, must be firmly in place. Protection of the general public is not a police state, or a military takeover. However, those men and women in police and military institutions are in a unique place to continue doing what they do, but against the real bad men, not nations, not architecture, and certainly not people minding their own business. Protect and serve, as it was meant to be. Protecting and helping the weak, the old, the vulnerable. The panels established in the initial few days, provided they are ready, can present their recommendations in an internet town hall type meeting. Vote by IP address could be used as a general indication of public agreement. We can hear recommendations of the necessary changes in distribution, equalizing the now vastly differing human conditions, and the redirecting, and retooling if necessary, of industries to production of the now higher quality goods, free of cost analysis, to the manufacturers now constrained to making cheap crap. From buildings to cell phones, everything is made from now on, first and foremost to be durable and last. Notes: establish further steps. Military. How to get them and their skills and abilities to work with the movement.
In 2 words, extremist conservatives. This is a force which will react with fear, as shown by their brain scans mentioned in part 1, and respond to preserve the norm, which under normal circumstances, might have evolutionary value. But these are not normal circumstances and the same forces within the sapiens minds that fear change. These forces reject the possibility that the earth, and everything on it, is dying. To the liberal mind, the death rattle is unmistakable. We don't have to make a case here. Anyone who has ever tried to hold a discussion with an extremist conservative knows all too well that they might as well be talking to a totally different species of being, which is exactly our subthesis, by the way, and we can assume they feel similarly. There are no concessions, no deviations from their ideology, and I'm sure they see us in the same way. So there we are, an immovable force meeting an irresistible force. And if it then cancels out, and nothing happens, then humanity may never again be put into the hopper. The science behind this division in human-mindedness, must be researched and understood as soon as possible. We are going to have some very serious discussions of what we will do, and what is going too far, in molding the basic structure of human thought. Yes, mind control at its best. We are going to take control of our lives, and that means taking control of our lives. No more random humans. No more pockshots at good or abusive parents. No childhood traumas. No more bullying or lashing out because it's just how it is with boys or girls. It is. Only if we let it. So the reason we must inevitably fade away in the memory of the grand universe, is because of us. Like in so many of our individual lives, the life of our species is its own worst enemy. Perhaps our only enemy.
Until we accept that we will have to use whatever is necessary to gain full cooperation and consent, through understanding the problem, not just coercion, then we risk the addicts realizing this goal before we do. They could just as easily make mindless consumer slaves of us, and they already have a huge head start. We can fight fire with fire for the good of humanity, rather than to enslave it.
Mr. Faith and Physics, and everyone who worked on this production, wish us all the very best of luck. We are going to need it.